Right, we're turning to rugby now, and Alan Quinlan is on the line. Morning to you, Quinny.
Morning, Adrian. How are you?
Flying it, thanks. One thing that we wanted to get into with you straight away was the comments from Andy Farrell during the week about Andrew Porter, who, as everybody will be aware, was a loose head turned tight head from 2016 to now. And Andy Farrell now saying this week that he's our number one tight head at the minute, but there's a conversation about moving him back to loose head because the other options there are aging. Is it not incredibly unfair on a guy who has already had his position turned upside down 4 years ago?
No, it's easier to go to loose head from a tight head. I think from speaking to props over the years, I think the famous one on Munster was Peter Clohessy went from tight head to loose head when John Hayes emerged. And he always said to me, Peter Clohessy, that a loose head was a doddle compared to tight head. And I wouldn't say it's a doddle. Anywhere in the front row is not a doddle. But he just said that the pressure isn't the same. You're not under as much stress as a loose head as the tight head, And
but whatever about the skills, Quinny, like the idea that there've been, like, you remember we spoke to him not that long ago, and he was talking about John Fogarty pulling him aside in 2016 and saying that the loose head list was long and that he should specialise in another area. So they've invested in him in that area for 4 or 5 years, and now they're saying, think
it's easier for him to go back to loose head. He's not going to lose any of the tight head experience, and that's my point really. I think experimenting with a really good loose head to trying to make him into a tight head can be trickier. And obviously he's had the transition over and has done remarkably well, and he's top class international tight head now. He's still learning. The Saracen experience would have been a setback, but I think he scrummaged very well last weekend against England, and it's easier to go over to loose head is what I'm saying. So it's not going to affect him in a negative way at all. If you get Tadhg Furlong back and you can get, you play, if you had to play Porter at loose head, well, you're getting two incredibly powerful, strong guys who are really good ball players around the field as well. So it's not an issue for me. I think the depth chart now at loose head isn't where we thought it was because, Cian Healy has been around a long time and he looks tired at times. He's still very explosive and very experienced and very important to Ireland. But the impact off the bench and stuff isn't the same with Kilcoyne not being there. And, Jack McGrath has slipped down the pecking order. And, so that depth that you speak about has changed. So we need to get fresh blood and new players, challenging for that position again and get some more depth at loose head. So, I'd have no issue with Porter moving over there. I think obviously in some games you might want to, as I said, have Porter and Furlong on the field together.
Andy Dunn was on with us during the week, Quinny, and he was talking about not seeing very much change in our tactics in the games against England, that he had fairly heavy defeats to England over the last 3 games thereabouts. It's concerning on the face of it. Do you agree that that's the case? And if so, how concerned are you by it?
Yeah, I'm not hugely concerned. I think they're trying to change. Look, it's very early and we've got to give Andy Farrell and Mike Catt time. Of course, they've got to take some criticism for, some of the performances. The 2 big ones are the English games, aren't they? We've seen glimpses. I thought the performance in Paris was very, very positive, particularly in the first half. They did make mistakes and errors, and the pressure from the French and when the French get on a roll and they get things happening they can do that to anyone. So look, there's definitely that game you'd look back and say there was mistakes more than anything, but they were trying to come up with a new structure. The team has been very unsettled. 9 and 10, the centres probably haven't. There's been a couple of changes there. Ringrose has been a loss in the attack, I think, and. So I do think that looking back last weekend, and any back would say this, and I agree, in a certain sense, I do agree with Andy. But from a forwards point of view, I know myself, you can't lose 4 lineouts. They had 8 lineouts in the first half last Saturday, and they lost 4 of them. And even 1 or 2 of the 4 that they won were sloppy, and didn't really get anywhere with them. So you lose 4 lineouts in a game, well, of course it's going to affect your attack, and it's where you win it. And even 2 of the lineouts we won were at the front, and you tried to attack. I think one we brought James Lowe around the front of the lineout, and it's more difficult to attack from the front. So to get your attack right, your set pieces to be right, the scrum, but particularly the line out. And we've seen under Joe Schmidt, when Ireland have profited in their attack and been really clinical and good and stressed the opposition, it's come off, a lot of the time, it's come off good lineouts with Leinster and Ireland over the years. So our lineout is a problem, and a lineout leader and a dominance and a body language that, you know, you look at the Irish lineout now, and I'm talking about the big games, you know, they did well against Wales, they'll do well at the weekend against Georgia, it'll be fine. But those big games, England haven't the best defensive lineup. We struggled. We made poor decisions. They literally had Launchbury and Itoje and didn't have a third jumper going up in the air, and so that indicates there's space somewhere, and we didn't find that space, and our delivery was poor. So there's issues around the attack for sure, but the issues start with the set piece, and the lineout just wasn't good enough last week, and that's an area where they really have to sort out their attack going forward. Where do we launch attacks from? How quickly can you get the ball in the middle towards the tail of the lineout? Because that's, if you get good quality ball in that area in the lineout, well, you can get the ball into Bundy Aki's hands or Chris Farrell's early, and they can run it on Farrell and they can test him, and you get over the gain line. You hope then that ruck is quick, and then you can attack again. But if that ball is sloppy and slow and you lose it, it's impossible.
It's interesting that you talk about where Ireland launch attacks from, because if you talk about losing lineouts, you immediately think of Johnny May's incredible try last week. And Eddie Jones was talking about working a little bit with Liverpool over the course of the last few months in terms of their transitional play. And that's where the Johnny May try comes from. Do you think that the Irish coaching team are operating at anything like that level, where they are trying to pull in different facets of other sports, where they actually are approaching this in quite an advanced way? Because that seems to be how England are approaching it at the moment.
Well, England are different on, you know, they got to World Cup final, their depth, their, you know, the level of detail they're at is probably where we were at in 2018. I think when you have so many personnel changes, there's no point in bringing in extra expertise when you have a very unsettled team at the moment. Of course, it's always a good idea, and these kind of things come out when you're winning and when you're on the front foot. Ireland have had plenty of different specialists in over the years from other sports talking to the team. Joe Schmidt was renowned for bringing in different people, and you know, the sports science around the detail is of a very high level, and the way they monitor the players and their work rate and all that stuff in the field is of a very high level. But I think the issue at the moment is trying to find a settled team, getting confidence back into the group, and getting a little bit of an aura. The expectation is totally different. You were at the World Cup with me, and we still had that expectation of Ireland finding form, finding performance. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world that even for a year or two that expectation is dampened down, and we go back a little bit to being the underdogs. And if we produce a big performance against one of the big teams, it'll be great. But obviously you want to stay and deal with expectation and enjoy that, because that's the big shift in my career onto where you know, our rugby players are now, and particularly in the provinces, having dominance, winning European Cups, and the success with Ireland. I'd rather have that expectation and pressure on my back, but I don't think it's a bad thing. And in some quarters, there's calls that Andy Farrell should have made more changes, and he's probably, you know, it's hard to just throw everyone out and make a raft of changes. But I do think this is a crucial period in the next 12 months for Ireland. You know, if he caps Shane Daly tomorrow, that'll be 10 new caps this year. Out of the 10 new caps, have we found any superstars? Have we found anyone? You know, Ronan Keller, Caelan Doris, probably James Lowe. You know, Max Deegan has been out injured for a while. Very exciting player as well. But, you know, players we really want to find. We want to find an out half. We want, you know, Harry Byrne to come in there. We want Jack Crowley to come in. Maybe Ben Healy. James Hume from Ulster, Ryan Baird from Leinster. You know, there's a lot of good, exciting young players. I was just looking back at some stuff from the under-20s this morning. They were brilliant this year. They won a Triple Crown. They didn't get to finish their championship. They won a Grand Slam the year before. So there's a raft of young players in all the provinces, in Connacht, in Ulster, that we want to try and get in. And I think, you know, I going back to your original question, of course, the RFU, and they've been very good, as I said, under Joe in bringing in different people. And I'm sure that's what you can do in international windows when they're closed, i.e. they finish this Autumn Nations. I think there'll be a big review and debrief of what happened and planning and preparing for the Six Nations. Eddie Jones obviously came out about that stuff with Liverpool, which is really interesting for anyone who's into sports, about, you know, being able to monitor that absolute detail of the work rate off the ball, on the ball. But that's something that's not new. I think that's been in rugby for a while, where you get called out. Even when I played a number of years ago, you do get called out if you're not covering ground, and it's very easy to see that. But obviously to get the real data of actually kilometers covered and all that stuff, and you know what you're doing off the ball is really interesting.
Yeah. All right, Quinlan, enjoy the game of the weekend. Thanks a million. Alan Quinlan.
Cheers. Thanks, lads.
On this Friday morning.